James Morrison's weathered hands, hardened by 50 years of life, guide molten steel into molds without a tremor. 4 decades ago, these same hands gripped an L-85A1 rifle in the Royal Infantry, patrolling the cold streets of Northern Ireland. Now he operates a forklift at Sheffield's Riverside Steel Factory. Life had drawn him a completely different path. In his early days at the factory, colleagues were curious about his past. "Morrison, why did you leave the army?" Tom had asked. James had simply said, "Time for a change." In reality, what he'd witnessed in Bosnia had shaken him deeply, leading to his decision to return to civilian life. "James, shift change," his supervisor Pete shouts. Morrison wipes his hands on his oily apron, glances at his watch. 6 p.m., time to return home to his wife Sarah and 16-year-old son Daniel. The same routine for 20 years, the same peace. When he enters their home in one of Sheffield's working-class neighborhoods, Sarah is preparing dinner in the kitchen. The smell of fish and chips fills his nostrils. Even after 20 years of marriage, her eyes still hold the same warmth from the day they first met. Back then, James was a young sergeant, and Sarah worked as a nurse at the hospital. Daniel sits at his computer in the living room, studying for university entrance exams. He wants to study engineering, determined to forge his own path rather than follow in his father's footsteps. "Dad, how does the situation in Ukraine look?" Daniel asks, not lifting his head from BBC News. The screen shows reports of Russian forces massing at the border. James shrugs. "Politics, son. Not our business." But deep down, he's worried. As a former soldier, he can smell danger from miles away. At night, after Sarah falls asleep, he watches news channels, studies maps, analyzes the situation. NATO reports, Russian tank divisions, supply lines, nothing unfamiliar. February 24th, 2022, exactly 5:30 in the morning. James's Nokia phone rings. He recognizes the tone. This is an emergency call. Sarah's sister Elena is calling from Kiev. Her voice trembles, with explosion sounds in the background. James, Russian tanks are entering the city. I don't know what to do with my children." Elena's voice is filled with panic. Sarah jolts awake, grabs the phone, and starts speaking to her sister in Ukrainian. James immediately grasps the situation. Elena's voice mixed with distant jet engine sounds, sirens wailing. These sounds are familiar to him. Sarah hangs up and turns to her husband. They bombed Bornholm Airport. Elena is hiding in the apartment basement with the children. They're trembling with fear. They've turned metro stations into shelters, but James silently draws the map in his mind. From Kiev westward to the Polish border, 331 miles. Main roads likely under target. Safe routes. "What's she saying?" James asks, seeing Sarah crying and getting worried. "They need to escape but don't know how. No fuel. Roads are closed. Elena's husband died 3 years ago. She's alone with 2 children. Risk assessment, logistical planning, escape routes. It's as if he's been transported back 20 years. Sarah, are the passports ready?" "Elena's and the children's." "Yes, but James, what are you thinking?" "Tell Elena to head west, through Lviv to the Polish border. Przemysl City. We'll meet her there." "James, are you crazy? That's a war zone." James stands up, retrieves his old military bag from the bedroom. It still contains maps, compass, and first aid supplies. "I can't leave people there. We're taking Daniel too." Over the next 2 days, James plans meticulously. He calls old military contacts, researches the refugee situation in Europe. Though Sarah initially objects, she recognizes her husband's determination. When they explain the situation to Daniel, the young man is surprised. "Dad, are we really going?" "Son, sometimes in life you have to do what's right, even if it's risky. But school? There are more important lessons than school." James buys canned food, blankets, and medicine from the local supermarket. He has his car serviced and buys extra fuel containers. Sarah takes leave from the hospital. 3 days later, they board the ferry from Calais. Their car is loaded with supplies. James's old military bag contains maps, GPS, radio, and military standard first aid equipment. The Poland-Ukraine border is complete chaos. The town of Przemysl has 5 times its normal population. Thousands of refugees are flowing in every direction. Women run with babies in their arms. Elderly men struggle with walkers. Children cry. James had seen this scene before. Bosnia, 1995. The same chaos, the same desperation, the same fear. "Dad, this is..." Daniel can't find the words. "This is the real face of war, son." Speaking with Elena by phone, they find her. Elena has an 8-year-old daughter, Anya, and a 12-year-old son, Victor. The children haven't slept for 48 hours and are terrified. James, we didn't know what to do, Elena cries. You're safe now, I'll get you home. But spending the night at the temporary refugee camp, James sees the situation. About 400 people staying outdoors, in tents or cars. Children are getting sick, elderly can't find medicine. Food is insufficient. That night in their tent, he talks with Sarah. Sarah, look at these people, they need our help. James, we're just one family. How can we help so many people? James steps out of the tent and looks at the camp. Children crying, parents talking anxiously, elderly people coughing. I don't know, but we can try. In the army, they taught me leave no one behind. This isn't just about Elena. The next morning, James walks around the camp, finding people who speak English. Alexei, a 25-year-old former math teacher. Oksana, a nurse. Dmitry, an electrical technician. How many people are here? James asks. 406 people, Alexei says. Most from Kiev, some from Kharkiv, Mariupol. Where are you all planning to go? We don't know. Germany, France, England. We've applied everywhere. James explains his plan. I can find you a safer, more organized place, but we need to move as a group, together. James's military experience and leadership skills kick in. He organizes the 400 people into 20 groups, appointing a responsible leader for each group. He establishes a communication network. Alexei, you'll be the main translator. Oksana, you're responsible for medical situations. Dmitry, technical problems are yours. Daniel watches his father's methodical approach with amazement. Sarah begins organizing the women and children. The first major problem is food and water. James meets individually with local farmers and shop owners. His British accent and respectful manner, combined with his military bearing, creates trust. We're not refugees, just helping these people, he tells farmer Kowalski. We can pay. The second problem is transportation. James negotiates with bus companies. Some agree to help, others demand payment. James is prepared to use his own savings. The third major problem is the destination. James researches refugee reception centers in Germany, finding a suitable facility near Hamburg. 4 days later, the convoy is ready. 22 buses, 6 trucks, 406 people. James leads in his own car, coordinating via radio. Sarah holds the map beside him. Daniel cares for Elena's children in the back. Convoy starting. Maintain safe distances. Don't lose radio contact, James says over the radio. The first 3 hours pass smoothly, but near Fretzwaff, problems begin. Victor, Elena's son, develops a high fever. The child hasn't eaten properly for 48 hours, falling ill from stress and cold. James stops the convoy, takes the child to the nearest hospital. I'm swamped. Go to another hospital, the doctor says. James raises his voice. This child is fleeing war. His family was killed. This is their only hope. Seeing James's determination, the doctor admits the child, gives antibiotics, and sets up an IV. He needs to wait 2 hours. The convoy will wait, James says. Sarah turns to her husband. James, if we delay, other children might get sick too. We leave no one behind, Sarah, no one. On the afternoon of the second day, a fire breaks out in one of the buses in the middle of the convoy. The electrical system short-circuited, and the engine compartment caught fire. 32 people are on the bus, mostly elderly and children. As soon as James hears the alarm on the radio, he stops his car and runs to the fire scene. Using the fire extinguisher he carries, he tries to put out the flames. Evacuate everyone. Right now, he shouts. Alexei translates, and people panic as they exit the bus. Elderly Mariah has injured her leg and can't walk. James lifts the old woman onto his back, carrying her to safety. Sarah runs over, opening the first aid kit. Looks like a fracture, Sarah says. We need to get her to a hospital. Okay, immediately. James makes the decision quickly. Alexei approaches. James, people are tired. Some are starting to complain. They're saying, why did we come if there are so many problems? James gathers the entire convoy by the roadside, standing before 400 people. I know you're tired. I know you're scared. I know this is harder than you planned. But if we abandon each other, if we don't stand together in difficult times, none of us can truly be safe. As Alexei translates, people listen quietly. I promise you, I will get each and every one of you to safety. But we must be together. We must trust each other. Maria is our grandmother today. Victor is our son. Tomorrow maybe one of you will need help. An elderly man steps forward, hugs James, and says something in Ukrainian. Alexei translates. He says you're like an angel. God sent you. When they reach the German border, they face a new problem. Special permission is needed to cross such a large group. Border guards are stuck on procedures. James requests to speak with the commander. German Border Police Commissioner, Hans Mueller, is a serious man. These people are fleeing war, Commissioner. There are babies, children, elderly, sick people among them. I understand, but we have procedures. We need to register and check each one individually. This will take days. These people can't wait that long in cars and buses. James shows his military ID, explains his background. Mueller, being a former soldier himself, shows understanding. All right, Herr Morrison. I trust you. I'll open a special corridor, but they're all your responsibility. I accept. When they arrive at the Harburg Refugee Reception Center near Hamburg, everyone is crying. Tears of joy, relief, peace. Children start running. Elderly kneel and pray. Elena runs and hugs James. You're not just a brother-in-law, James. You're our guardian angel. No, Elena. We protected each other. All together. The camp director, Dr. Weber, greets James with amazement. You brought 406 people by yourself? Not by myself, doctor. Together with my family and these people. This is incredible organization. I've never seen such coordination. Most people arrive alone and get lost. James goes to Victor. The child has recovered and is playing. Uncle James, thank you, Victor says in English. You're a strong child, Victor. Take good care of your mother and sister. 3 days later, James returns to England with his family. But this journey has deeply changed him. He thinks quietly in the car. Do you regret it? Sarah asks. No. For the first time in my life, I feel like I've done something truly important and meaningful. Daniel asks from the back. Dad, are you a real hero? James looks at his son in the mirror. No, son. I just did what needed to be done. Real heroism isn't in big events like this. It's hidden in small daily kindnesses. When they return to Sheffield, James continues his routine at the factory. But he's different now. More purposeful, more peaceful. Months pass. James regularly receives emails from Hamburg. Alexei, James, we've left the camp. We have jobs now, children are going to school, but new refugees keep coming. Can you teach me how to help them? Victor, Uncle James, I learned German. I'm the best student in school. When I grow up, I'll be an engineer and help people like you. Maria, dear James, my leg has completely healed. I pray for you every day. When James reads these messages, his eyes fill with tears. Sarah watches her husband. You've changed, James. You're happier, because I've found the meaning of my life. James starts volunteering at a refugee aid organization in Manchester on weekends. Sarah and Daniel join him. When newly arrived Ukrainian families see James, they say, he's our hero. 1 year later, James, Sarah, and Daniel visit Hamburg again. Most of those 406 people have now built their own lives. Children go to school, adults work, elderly play with grandchildren. Elena now owns a flower shop. James, know that you didn't just save our lives, you gave us a new beginning. Victor is now 13, speaks perfect German, and is first in his class. Uncle James, when I grow up, I'll be a military pilot. Anya, that little girl now 9 years old, gives James a specially made drawing. In the picture is a big man surrounded by hundreds of small figures. At the bottom she wrote, "Mine held James." As James looks at the drawing, his eyes fill with tears. But these aren't tears of sadness, they're tears of pride and deep satisfaction. That night in the hotel room, he talks with Sarah. You know, Sarah, when I was young in the army, I always thought I'd participate in great wars, save the world. Turns out my real war started at this age. What war, James? The war of humanity, the war of goodness. And this war never ends. Daniel looks out at Hamburg's lights from the balcony. Dad, when I grow up, I want to be like you too. Son, you'll be much better than me already, because you learned these lessons while young. James Morrison, 55-year-old former soldier, still a forklift operator in Sheffield. But now his colleagues at the factory call him Iron Heart, because they've learned too. Real iron doesn't melt in fire, it becomes harder when it cools. Just like James, instead of melting in war's fire, he emerged stronger. And every night, in 406 different places, in 406 different languages, the same prayer is said. Thanks be for James Morrison. He is our hero. James never knows, but the people who left that camp in Hamburg are now helping other newly arrived refugees the same way. Alexei is now a volunteer coordinator. Oksana handles medical aid. Dmitry provides technical support, because real heroism is contagious. One person's courage affects hundreds, and those hundreds affect thousands. James's story hasn't ended. Every morning as he goes to the factory, every evening as he returns home, every weekend as he goes to volunteer work, his story continues, because real heroes never stop.